We got a question from a fan on Facebook who wants to ask about your main guitar influences. So, who were you influenced by?
Well, they've come and gone. But actually, no, they've always been there. But every year I hear a new guitar player and think, oh my God, who's this? I've got to find out more about this person and how where they came from. I suppose one of my biggest influences to begin with would have been Hank Marvin and the Shadows when I was very small. That was my kind of introduction to pop music. Wasn't very much of it on the radio, but they'd always play Cliff Richard and the Shadows. And then you saw the Shadows when they had these silk suits and red electric guitars. That just lit a fire in me. And so that was, I just love that, the whole twangy thing in that deep reverb with a bit of echo. It was a mysterious sound, and I was intrigued by it right from the get-go. And then as I grew up, then the Beatles happened. They weren't so much a guitar band per se, they were more songs and voices and harmonies and amazing. Everyone knows how great they were.
Hmm.
But I just loved the idea of the Beatles and how they used guitars. I just thought I'd love to do that. So George Harrison, particularly when he picked up the Rickenbacker 12 string, when he came back to England with that in '64, and the Hard Day's Night album, that was a huge, that was a game changer for me. Just the sound of those instruments, how they were recorded and how they used them.
I think
That's what being in a group was all about. They started as a rock and roll rhythm and blues outfit doing covers of American songs, Chuck Berry and Little Richard especially. And then they just sort of found their own voices, and they were just so phenomenally gifted. Their muse just took them to these places. They were encouraged, of course, by George Martin, the producer, who was a brilliant musician who could hear the direction they were going in and helped them. And they had the best studio in the country, and honest management, honest publisher. So they had everything going for them. And but you know, it was their talent and inspiration that led them to where they were going. They weren't actually tied to anyone's style. Big and brave enough to do it all and just take a risk. And most of those risks paid off, as we all know.
it's the sacred
But
text.
after the Beatles, I suppose I started listening to the first guitar player to turn my head was probably Jeff Beck, and he still is until even though we lost him this year. Or he was always there. Just an amazing original guitarist. Can't really pin down his influences that much, though he would own up to being a big fan of Cliff Gallup from Gene Vincent's band and those rockabilly players. But he was a blues guitarist, one of the best. But he took that, in the way that Jimi Hendrix did later, created these amazing sounds. I remember hearing the riff Over, Under, Sideways, Down by the Yardbirds and A Heart Full of Soul. They both came out in the summer of '65. And that was, again, head turning. How do you make that sound? How does a guitar sound that great? And then later, of course, Eric Clapton, obviously, Jimi Hendrix. I would say Beck, Hendrix, and Clapton, just to be boring and traditional. Yeah, they were huge influences, probably the biggest ones on me, because they influenced a lot of guitarists that I would later go on to copy or emulate or attempt to emulate. And so, you have to trace it all the way back to those three guys. A lot of guitar players will have their detractors. You'll always see people on Facebook, it's going around all the time, people raving about one player, and then you'll see all the comments and they'll say, yes, but he did that, that was rubbish. This is Jeff Beck. No one argues about how brilliant he was. Everybody has respect for Jeff, and rightly so. And the fact that at his age, even in his 70s, you must hear what was the orchestral one he did?
Was it Nessun Dorma that
He,
you're thinking of?
yes, stunning music all the way through, and his choice of singers as well, and the string arrangements, absolutely gorgeous. What was it called? Emotion and Commotion, I think is what it's called.